Good morning. It's good to see all of you, and welcome to those that are on Zoom. So when I graduated from college, was graduating from college about over 30 years ago, it's been quite a while, I really wanted to go somewhere else in the world and serve. I had a notion I wanted to do that. I had started to apply for the Peace Corps, and I wondered about missions. But at the same time, I met Dale, and that was not his notion of what he wanted to do. So I reevaluated, and I got a job that I thought I would like, and I stayed here in Pennsylvania. So a few years later, I mentioned to a good friend that I always had wanted to go somewhere and serve, and I wondered if I had missed the opportunity to do missions. And she said something like this: well, you don't have to go across the world to serve. You can serve the people right around you where you are. She was young, but wise. So I didn't have to go to the other side of the world to serve. I could do the same thing here. Serve, mission, bless people. So in some ways, maybe I've done this in small ways in the community, and I have served in the church. But if serving and mission are big things with plans and accomplishments, I'm not sure that I've done that. In our training, Dale and I have been studying spiritual disciplines. Spiritual disciplines are practices that we do that can help us connect with God in our daily lives. They put us in a place of being able to hear God and feel more connected with Him. There are things like prayer and Bible reading and fasting. One of the books we're reading is called Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. And he divides these disciplines into things. There's inward disciplines, which are prayer and fasting and study, meditation. He also has corporate disciplines, which are confession, worship, celebration, guidance. And then there's the outward disciplines, which are simplicity, solitude, submission, and the fourth one listed is service. Did you know service is a spiritual discipline? Did you ever think of it that way? Serving is a spiritual discipline. So maybe this thing about wanting to serve wasn't just so much something I wanted to do, but it was something I'm supposed to do as a believer. It's something that can help me draw closer to God. So we're going to dig into this more and think about what that means. Why is service a spiritual discipline? Just think about that. Why would serving other people, be a spiritual discipline? Why would it help us feel more connected to God? Just think about that. I always thought it was about the other person. But is there something in it for me too? Does it change my heart? If we serve others, does it change our heart? So remember, spiritual practices are something that help us connect more with God on a daily basis. They kind of are like exercise. Like, I know that I should be exercising my muscles in my upper body to stay stronger. I walk, but I've kind of realized, you know what, I maybe need to do something to keep my shoulders and my arms stronger, because as we get older, they seem to get weaker, at least what I find. And so discipline would be me exercising, doing some kind of weightlifting kind of thing to make that stronger. So far, I just think about that. And that doesn't help. Just thinking about it doesn't do anything. So spiritual disciplines are like that. So if service is a spiritual discipline, then doing that on a daily basis would help us make us stronger in that way. So first of all, is serving others scriptural? What do you think? Is serving others scriptural? It is. Let's look at some words of Jesus. So when the disciples and Jesus were on the road to Capernaum, the disciples were arguing about who would be the greatest. In their time, it was really important to figure out who would be the greatest, or at least who was in charge. It's kind of important in our time too, but it was a big deal then. And so they're on the road, they're kind of arguing about this, and then they get to Capernaum and they go in a house, and in Mark 9:35, Jesus says this, sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, "Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all." So that kind of took the wind out of their who's the greatest argument. And then in Mark 10, verses 43 and 45, Jesus said this, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many." And then in John 13, when Jesus washed the disciples' feet, he said he set an example for them, and that they should go and do likewise and serve one another. So Jesus, the Lord and Savior, washed their feet, which was the lowest task in that time. Recently, Christian Aguilar spoke here. He spoke here last year and then maybe this year. And when he was here, he said something about, coming here and meeting is good, worshiping together is good, and fellowship, those are really good things. But he challenged us to go and serve locally. And he said, when people serve, it comes alive. So something about that to me sounds like practice or discipline. When we go and do it, it makes our faith come alive. Like if I would do my weightlifting, those muscles would come alive. They might be more alive, get stronger. So that's something to think about. Serving others makes our faith come alive. But when we hear words like mission and serve, how do you feel? When you hear those words, mission or serve, is it something you say, "Oh yeah, I want to go do it," or is it something you say, "Well, do I have to do that?" I mean, that's something to think about. Sometimes we can think of serving or mission as having a mission, going somewhere else in the world and doing it, having a plan, having a project, something that's really big. And for many of us, that can feel overwhelming or just something we're not cut out for. But in this book, Richard Foster's book, he talks about service differently. He does say there is large service or missions which are good and needed, but sometimes our infatuation with the big deal blinds us to the fact that ministry of the small things is just as important. And these were his words. Sometimes the infatuation of the big deal can blind us to the fact that the ministry of small things is just as important. And the ministry of small things, he says, is daily service. Service we do in our daily lives. And so in the book, he gives some things that could be daily service. These are just things we can do on the way through the normal daily rhythms of our life, where you are. Whether it's at home, in your neighborhood, at your workplace, in the shop, at school, wherever you are. The first one he listed is service of hiddenness. So doing something for someone that they don't notice. And being a mom in a house, moms and parents do a lot of that. Serving in ways that no one notices. But this challenges us to do it elsewhere too. Can you help someone in a way they never see? And I don't know, maybe you can think of some examples of that. The second thing he talked about is service of small things. Recently, my neighbor called me, and she's kind of got some disabilities. She's not able to do a lot, but she was watching a show, the Today Show, and she said she was excited because the person that was being interviewed had talked about ways you can serve even when it's difficult to serve. And what the person being interviewed said, you can be with someone, you can do for them, or you can provide. So those are some small things you can do. You could also just be with them in a difficult moment. Are they going through a hard time? Just be with them right then. And that could even be someone in the grocery store. Or you could help them get through the door or get in somewhere, or give them a ride. The third one is one I never thought of, the service of guarding someone's reputation. So what is that? Could it be that if I know something bad about you, I keep that to myself, unless it's going to hurt someone else. But if I know something bad, I don't have to share that with anyone. I can guard your reputation. Or if you hear gossip or somebody talking mean about someone, you can say, hey, why don't you go talk to the person you're talking about? So and you might think of that of other ways, of how can we help guard the reputation of another person? Certainly if you're in danger, you would want, if you're in danger or somebody else is in danger, you would want to share that at least with the appropriate people. But a lot of times we're sharing things that are not really necessary for other people to know. Titus 3:1-2 says, be ready, or we're to be ready to do whatever is good and to slander no one. The next thing is the service of being served. So in this song we sang, and I got to think about what those words, let me have the grace to let you serve me too. Some of us are people that like to help other people. But then sometimes we're like, no, we don't want you to help me, But can that really be our pride saying, we want to stay one ahead? We don't want to be served. But by letting other people serve you, are you blessing them? The next one is common courtesy, and I'm sure some of you will agree. We need more of that in today's world, where we say please and thank you. It can be holding the door or protecting, if you're walking down the sidewalk, walking in a way to protect the other person, or even sending a note or a card or a text or an email of encouragement. Just common courtesy. One thing he mentioned was RSVPing. That's something that's getting lost. And it is frustrating if somebody is planning an event and we don't do that. So let's just do the service of helping them do what they're doing. And then a big one is hospitality. Now we like to think of hospitality as having people into our homes with a whole big meal. But I remember Pat saying years ago, it doesn't take much to get together with someone, just time. And if it's food, it's something very simple. But hospitality can be something you extend to someone at the grocery store or as you are out in the park or wherever. It's just simply taking time to be available for the other person. And in the Bible, when it talked about hospitality, often it was not talking about those we were most comfortable with or that we knew the best. Many times it was talking about hospitality to the stranger or to the hurting. So when we think about the service of hospitality, I think it pushes us a little more beyond our comfort zone. In 1 Peter 4:9, it says, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Well, we might need to practice that sometimes, because sometimes it can be hard. If I'm busy going somewhere, trying to get all my list of things done, and it comes to mind, oh, I should visit with that person standing in the parking lot at the store. Do I go to them and visit with them, or do I walk the other way to save time? The next service we could do, and this is a big one, is listening. And not this book, but another book I have gave a test of listening. How good of a listener are you? And I need to do some work in that area. So if you want that test, I could share it with you too, and you could do it. But listening, are we listening to other people with a non-judgmental, agenda-free, compassionate attitude? Or are we listening to them with our agenda, in judgment, and without compassion? Or are we just listening distracted? And that's a big area where I struggle. I'm distracted with what I'm doing, not taking enough time to listen. James 1:19 says to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. In Foster's book, he said, the most important part of our fellowship is listening well. Do we think about that? The most important part of our coming here is listening well. And here I'm the one doing all the talking right now. And we do not have to have the correct answers to listen. In fact, sometimes having the correct answers can hinder us from listening. So how does that challenge us when we're thinking about serving another person in listening? I have a few books that really talk about that. And bearing another's burdens. And some of you are doing this a lot right now for people in your families, for people that you know, for other people here in the church. Colossians 6:2 says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So it's walking with them that extra mile, or sitting with them when they're in pain, or helping them through something difficult. And the last one is service of sharing the word of life. And so we look at that and we're like, what does that mean? Well, we know the Bible is the word of life. But how he explained this is when we sense or hear a leading from God, we should share it with other believers and other people around us. Because no one person gets all that God wants to say. We're dependent on one another to receive the full counsel of God. And I don't think he's an Anabaptist, Richard Foster, but that sounds to me like an Anabaptist kind of way. And he also said, we want to hear the word of life from the very young and the very old. From everyone. We all bring. It doesn't matter how much experience you have, you can bring that. So let's go back to Christian Aguilar's words. Anybody remember what they were?
Service brings faith alive.
Okay, serving can help bring our faith alive. My younger days of yearning to serve may have been about me, and even now, serving can sometimes be about me. Our egos can definitely get in the way. We want to feel good about ourselves. But by practicing service daily in these small things that we talked about, will it eventually become more and more about God and about others? So in any spiritual discipline, as we start doing it, it's hard. And some of you are living this out really well anyway. But I do think we go through these rhythms of life where we might be doing something a lot, and then we get distracted and get busy, and then we're not doing it so much. So I wonder if practicing it daily can help us grow, it will become more and more about God and about others. To think about that, let's look at what Jesus said in Matthew 22:37-39. Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." So we've already talked about, we're in this season of Thanksgiving where we're thinking about our blessings, and Lois already challenged us to go and be a blessing. So is this daily service of small things, these things that we can do on the way, is this really a way of blessing the people around us that are beyond here, beyond this church building, out in our normal daily rhythm of life? At our church conference meeting last spring, and a few of us were there, I think Louise, Ed, and I, one of the speakers, her name was Emily Ralph Servant, said this: "Missions is not programs. Missions are God's people living with intentionality in whatever ways they can." So we could reword that with what the spiritual discipline is, service, and say, service is not programs. Service is God's people living with intentionality in whatever ways they can. Service is us living with intentionality in whatever way we can. And those ways I talked about, you don't need to know the Bible to do them. We don't need to go somewhere else to do them. We are all around people every day in our daily life. In Matthew 16:24, Jesus told the disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Is this why service is a spiritual discipline? It causes us to deny ourselves. Now we have to make sure we're not serving in a self-righteous way. And I do think, and I say this often, I think our ego keeps trying to get in the way. But if we practice more and more, can it become more about God and more about other people? Again, that exercising the muscles. At first, they're not very used to it, and they might ache and hurt, and you don't want to do it again. But the more and more you do it, the more it can bring your faith alive and help us love God more and more with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our mind, and help us love our neighbor as ourselves. And neighbor doesn't mean the people you're most comfortable with. Neighbor can mean our enemy, or the person that hurt us that we're angry with. One challenge to think of is doing one of these for somebody you are angry with, or frustrated with, or not comfortable with. So as a young adult, I did have that dream to go elsewhere in the world and serve, or mission. And the closest I ever came to that was a mission trip I took 10 years ago with the youth to South Dakota, to the Pine Ridge Reservation. And we did see the Spirit move as the youth built something on that mission church. And also as we served food and did activities with Native American children and adults each day, the Spirit was moving. So I do encourage you, if you ever have the opportunity to go on a mission trip, you should do that. It will be good for your soul, and for the souls of the people serving there, and for the souls of people you help. And if you feel called to missions or to go somewhere else in the world, you should definitely consider pursuing that too. Like our speaker last month from Eastern Mennonite Missions said, there's a lot of the world not reached yet. So I'm not saying do this daily service and don't do the other. I'm just saying this daily stuff we can all do. So as I look back, Dale and I and our kids have been able to serve in the small things with the people right around us, in our neighborhood, at our workplace, in the community. Whether it was listening to someone or being with someone in a hard time, or bearing someone else's burdens, or guarding someone else's reputation. And all those things that we could have done more. There's many times we didn't do them when we could have. So we have been able to serve on the way. And the friend that told me I could do it right where I was, she was right. How about you? Has serving on the way helped to bring your faith alive? Has serving on the way through your daily rhythms of life helped to bring your faith alive? And I know some of you serve all the time. I know when Louise talks about her days sometimes, I think she's serving someone from before I'm up. So on the back of the bulletin, you'll see those things that I listed, the service of small things. And that service word, you don't even have to use that. You could look at it as small ways to bless someone. I want you to think about that as you go this week. And I challenge you to bless or serve someone in one of those ways this week. If you're already doing this every day, maybe try a little more. And I know some of you are already doing this all the time. And challenge yourself to maybe serve someone you're not so crazy about. You know, someone that's hard to relate to, or someone you don't know. And as we come back in the next 2 weeks or so, we'll give you opportunity where you can share how you maybe blessed someone or how someone blessed you. The challenge is, it's a spiritual discipline anyway, and it forces us outside of here to serving out where everyone, where other people are. And that's what we're to do as the church. So as you go and you practice, think about this. Serving on the way brings our faith alive. And remember, the Holy Spirit is with you. God is already working where you are. So whatever you do is just a small part of it. He's already at work. But why not just join him in it? Thank you.